everyone, it's Kelly here. Welcome to my channel if this is your first time. Welcome back if you've been before. Lovely to have you either way. On this channel, we talk books. Today I am wrapping up the 5 books that I read in the month of January. And if you can hear in my voice that I'm a little bit croaky, that's because I am unwell. And I should be at work today, but it's probably not a good idea for me to spread illness around the school so early in 2026. Let's just keep that to myself. Okay, let's have a look at the books that we read. So the first book that I finished in the month was To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. Still got a bookmark in there. It's a very pretty one. And it is by bookmark is by Hooked on a Book AU, who I buy lots of bookmarks from. Anyway, the book. I actually listened to this one on audiobook and very much enjoyed the listening experience. It was a version that is narrated by Juliet Stevenson, and I think she did a fantastic job with the narration. I think she just has that perfect voice for this. For Virginia Woolf's work, I think, because much like the other Virginia Woolf book that I have previously read, which was Mrs. Dalloway, this is a very head thinky book as opposed to a plot heavy book. Not a lot happens in this book, but I very much appreciate those kinds of books, generally speaking. Now, I will say I definitely preferred Mrs. Dalloway, and I think there are definitely parallels. There's, stylistically, we are jumping from one character's head into another. That's also something that happens in Mrs. Dalloway, but I didn't enjoy this one as much as I did the other. The other thing that happens in this book that doesn't happen in Mrs. Dalloway is it messes with the timeline a little bit. So you have basically the first, it's more than half of the book. It's let's say 3/5 of the book is the earlier timeline. Then there's this weird middle period where it's passage of time and it's kind of moving on, and then we have and in between, in that passage of time, a war happens, World War One, I believe, and then the period after, and you just sort of are you find out this character's dead, this character's dead, and there's no further information really about that other than what we're seeing in other people's heads. And yeah, I didn't think the transition worked that well. So yeah, although I appreciate the style, the jumping between the thing, I just didn't like the how the timeline kind of worked in this one. It didn't work as well for me as Mrs. Dalloway did without that sort of a transition. But I am very glad to have read this classic. This was one I was supposed to be buddy reading in 2025. I did start it right at the end of December and just finished it off in the month of January. So I am done with that one. And yeah, I'm very pleased to have finished To the Lighthouse. The second book that I finished was this one called Best Australian Poems 2025, with guest editors Nam Lee and Jill Jones. This is a poetry collection, as you can gather from the title, that is pulling together poems. It is the kind of financial year, so it's July of 2024 through to June of 2025 that they're gathering the poems from. And then these two people here deciding which poems are the best. And I have to say I didn't always agree with them, and I think it must be, I've never read any, I don't know Jill Jones at all, I've not heard her name before. Nam Lee I've heard of, but I haven't read any poems by that poet, so I just wonder if stylistically their poetry is sort of not the kind of poetry that I normally gravitate towards, because I was finding that a lot of the poems in here were ones that were just kind of like over my head. And I do like to be a bit bamboozled by poetry. I don't like it to be too obvious. I do like there to be some like hidden meaning in there, but when it's so hidden that you're just like, I don't even know what this poem is about, then that's not the kind of poetry that works for me. But obviously it works for other people, so, you know, I don't know. However, I will say, you know, in any collection like this, it's always going to be a mixed bag. They're not always going to be the things that you would necessarily gravitate towards. And there was a mixture of things, and there were poems in here, as you can see from my little tabs up here, that I really did gel with and I really appreciated. There are poets I'm going to be looking forward to reading some more from in the future, and those poets, so these are ones that I haven't read from before, or maybe I might have read a poem here or there from these people, so they're new to me, but I'm looking forward to reading more from Bonnie Cassidy, Zanana Vucic, Sarah M. Saleh, Mark Roberts, Panda Wong, Jennifer Kornberger, and Alicia Brown. Very much looking forward to investigating more of their like individual collections perhaps, and hopefully reading more from those particular poets, because I really enjoyed the poems that were included in this collection from those poets. And there were also poems in here from poets I already knew, and some poems I had already read, and I loved to see them included in there. I really appreciated discovering some poets that I didn't already know, and, you know, investigating other poetry that didn't gel with me, but that's okay. Sorry, I haven't given you any ratings. I am clearly rusty with all of this, also not well. I actually gave almost all of the books that I read this month the exact same rating, which was 3.5. So to the Lighthouse and Best of Australian Poems 2025, I gave 3.5 stars to both of those. Okay, the next book that I read was Great Writers and the Cats Who Owned Them by Susannah Fullerton. This is a book that was gifted to me by my husband's auntie, and I really appreciated that. She just very much thought this was right up my alley, and I really enjoyed reading about writers who for the most part have passed away, and learning about their connection with their cats. So yeah, there were some very interesting people who were covered in here. Let me give you a little bit of a there were some ones that authors I hadn't really heard of, or like looked at any of their work before, but Charles Dickens is in there, Mark Twain, Colette, L.M. Montgomery, Ernest Hemingway, Dorothy L. Sayers, Muriel Spark, Doris Lessing, and Linley Dodd, who wrote the Harry McClary books. So that was a really interesting chapter, because it was talking about the cats that inspired the two main cats of that series, which many of us are familiar with, which are Slinky Malinky, and who was the focus of the chapter, but also Scarface Claw is based on a cat that they had at one point. So yeah, that was really, really interesting. The only thing that I would criticize about it was a little bit, it suffers from the same thing that a lot of very well researched books suffer from, which is including too much. This could have been a shorter book. It's not crazy long. It's only 274 pages and that's including all of the notes. But some of the chapters could have been a little shorter, with less included, because the way that it is framed is it's focused around a particular cat. So, for example, the chapter that is about Charles Dickens, is titled Bob, Who Helped Charles Dickens Open Letters. So it's framed around a particular cat, but sometimes that cat doesn't come into that author's life for a while, and she kind of goes through all of the other cats that they've ever owned or had contact with. And that felt a little bit weird to me. If you're framing it around a particular cat, that entire chapter should be about that cat. Otherwise, you should have just framed it around the author rather than the cat. So that sort of was a bit... I didn't love that. My brain didn't process it the way I think it was intended. Another thing that kind of bothered me a little bit about it was that she talks a little bit callously to some degree. Like, there's a little bit of empathy there, but about the ways that cats were treated in the past. So, for example, they talk about having to drown cats as a form of control of the cat population, like kittens and stuff. And, you know, yes, it is a feature of the time, but I feel like if you're going to talk about it today, you have to talk about it with today's sensibility. And also just sort of generally the ways in which some of these writers integrated cats into their lives wasn't a reflection of kind of the way that we do that now, which is fine because that's how it was. But I feel like she was very quick to kind of gloss over those things, and I get that that's not really the focus of the book, but you know, if you're going to mention it at all, mention it with more empathy, I feel. And the other thing that bothered me was that she mentions J.K. Rowling, and not in the year of our Lord 2025 this was published. We don't, and she wasn't even, so like there's these like interludes in the book where they talk about, where it's just like at the end of each chapter there's like a little vignette, I guess, and a lot of those are more modern authors. Some of them aren't, but often they're talking more about cats in books, for example, or like other kind of cats that are kind of linked to other things that are not so literary sometimes. So there's a section in there about the cats of Harry Potter. It didn't need to be there. Like, you did not have to include that. It's not even a focus chapter. And the other thing was mentioning that a particular author liking the Harry Potter series or something. I can't even remember what it was, but it bothered me. So yeah, that's a shame. Because we don't need to be doing that in 2025, especially when it's not even the focus. So anyway, that's that book. I also gave it 3.5 stars for the reasons that I've just given. But it was generally an enjoyable read. It was nice to learn about these authors and their cats. Yeah, so I'm glad to have knocked that one out, especially as it was a gift towards the end of last year. So I'm pleased to have been able to read it and, you know, feedback to the person who gave it to me. The next book that I finished was called Monster Field by Lucy Dougan. Now, I did not include this in my holiday haul. That would have been the video before this one. Mainly because I forgot, but also because I read it immediately. So I picked this book up while I was on holidays in January, and then I immediately read it. The main reason was because I had finished the other poetry collection. I wanted to have some poetry on the go, so I bought a poetry collection and then made a start. I had not heard of Lucy Dougan before, but this is a Giramondo, the publisher Giramondo poetry, and I generally trust their judgment about their poets. So yeah, I picked this one up and read it basically immediately. There were some quite good poems in this collection, particularly the ones about grief in different forms, as well as the ones about domestic life. Those were the ones that I tended to kind of gravitate towards. But there were also quite a few kind of mid poems in here that were like less good, or less I didn't connect with them as much, I should say. But anyway, I ended up giving this collection 3.5 stars. But I'm glad to have discovered Lucy Dougan, and I'll keep an eye out for her in the future, because there were definitely some poems in here that I really liked. And the last book that I read, you're gonna laugh, but it all will become clear as I wrap up the end of this video. But the book that the last book I read was called The Invisible Intruder by Carolyn Keene. This is a Nancy Drew mystery. And I picked this one up in a little free library towards the end of last year, but I don't think I hauled it. I don't think I've spoken about it on the channel. But it would have been in like December, potentially. That's probably why I didn't talk about it, because December was a bit of a mishmash because I was doing a Vlogmas, so weird things were going on. Anyway, I read this one. It was an enjoyable read. You know, it's a old-fashioned middle grade to teen kind of book, as all the Nancy Drew books are. There were some very convenient connections that get made that help to move the plot along, but it was an enjoyable mystery and it was a cozy read, and I gave it 3 stars. It did what it said on the tin and it was enjoyable enough. So, why did I read that book? Well, I'm so glad that you asked. As I mentioned in a previous video, this year I am doing the 2026 reading challenge from the 52 Book Club. I've got the journal that goes with it, and there are prompts that go that are included in. So there's 52 prompts. Now the 2 books, the first 2 books I finished, I haven't counted towards this challenge because they were carried on from 2025. So I'm only going to include books that I start and finish within 2026 in this challenge. And there is a prompt in here that I really couldn't think of anything other than Nancy Drew to include for it, and that is 2 or more authors, 1 pseudonym. So if you didn't know, Carolyn Keene isn't a real person, it's a pseudonym, and there were multiple authors that wrote the Nancy Drew books under that name. But yeah, that Carolyn Keene isn't a real person. So yeah, that was the book that I, because I was like, I can't think of anything other than Nancy Drew, and I don't have any Nancy Drews. And then because I had already decided I was going to do this back in December, then I happened to find this Nancy Drew in a little free library. I'm like, well, it has to be. This is the one. So I was able to pick that up. So that is why I read a Nancy Drew book. So that was prompt number 27. The Monsterfield book, Monsterfield, is titled in a serif font. So you can see right there, hopefully, that has the little curly curls. That's serif. Sans serif means they're kind of like the cleaner letters. And then the other one, so that's prompt 26, and then this book, Great Writers and the Cats Who Owned Them, I've put towards a book that cost you nothing because it was a gift, and that is prompt 39. So I have 3 books down in my 52 Book Club reading challenge, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with that as we continue on with the year in February and beyond. Hello, Editing Kelly here. I forgot to show you a couple of cool things that I got that are going to be bookish features of my year. One is this little books read counter that I ordered online, and I have started keeping track of where I'm up to. The other thing I'm doing is I have started collecting little pins to represent all of the books that I've read, and you will see there is only 3 there, and that is because I have 2 pins that I've ordered that haven't yet arrived. They should be arriving soon, and I'll add them when they do. Basically, this pin here is for To the Lighthouse. This one here that says "The future is bright" is the poetry 2025 best poetry, because that kind of made me think of this. And this third one is the book about the great writers and the cats who owned them, because it's a little cat sitting on some books. So I'm very excitedly collecting pins to match all of the books. So some of them are from my own collection. So this cat one I already had, but these 2 are new, and the 2 that are coming for the Nancy Drew book and the what was the other book that I read? Oh, the other poetry collection I have ordered. So yeah, I'm excited to keep doing that. I just forgot to show you when I was giving you my reviews. I'll try and remember for February. So just a little update as to where I'm up to with that, and a very big thank you to you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to chatting to you again soon. Bye for now.